Hello, Misfit Nation. Welcome to another edition of Lessons for Hannah. Many years ago, I introduced a new format alongside our regular episodes that are called Lessons for Hannah. Hannah is my daughter, and she's one of the main inspirations for the Misfit entrepreneur. And I wanted to have a place where that she could go and really learn from her dad and his Misfit friends throughout her life long after I'm dead and gone. And if you haven't listened to the first episode of the Lessons for Hannah's, I urge you to do so because it gives some more background and tells the amazing story of how Hannah came to be really in our lives. And Lessons for Hannah are really short, very useful, sometimes even comical lessons that I want to share with you and to give to Hannah to help in your lives. And because I want Hannah to have these for her life, I'm going to speak as though I'm talking directly to her. These episodes are a lot of fun, sometimes serious. And if you think there is a lesson that we should include in these episodes for the future, please don't hesitate to send it over to us. You can send it to us at support@misfitentrepreneur.com. We'd love to share that as well. And as a reminder, if you are new to this channel, hit the subscribe button below, give this video a like and a comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible as they come in. All right. So with all that being said, here goes this week's lesson for Hannah. Hannah, recently we did one of our mastermind meetings, and one of the talks that I did for the group was called Focus Over Fear. After giving the talk and having so many comment on how it made such a difference for them, I realized that I've never done a Lessons for Hannah episode on the topic of fear. And so I think fear is something that we all face at different times in our lives. And for many, maybe even it's an everyday thing. Fear is a major emotional driver that really can cause us to act in ways that are not necessarily in our best interest. But fear can also be a source of strength and opportunity when we use it in the right ways. So let's start by talking about where fear comes from. At the most animal brain level, we all come with pre-programmed fight or flight mechanisms for survival. The core of the mind will do everything it can, everything possible to avoid what it perceives as pain. And the mechanisms, when they're manifested, they take over, they cause reactions that if we took time to think deeply about, we probably wouldn't choose to do in the first place, but these happen automatically. And they happen in the moment. And a lot of times they consume us so that our logical side goes almost dormant to the fear. On top of the animal side of our brain, society teaches that risk is bad and really to stay away from it. So most people are not prepared to deal with risk, when in fact, risk is inherently a part of life and something that we should learn to live with, understand, and ultimately use to our advantage. So many people never reach their potential because of the fear of taking risk, stepping out, and becoming who they're truly meant to be. Make no mistake, though, fear is something we all have to live with, and we can't just turn it off or remove it from our lives, but we can use it to our advantage. Over the years, I've learned and come up with several principles that have really helped me harness fear to my advantage and also helped me to remain logical and not succumb to the impulse reactions of fear. And I'm going to get to the first principle with a simple question. And that question is, do you know what your chances of being alive are? Go ahead, take a guess. Your chances of being born are the same as if 2.5 million people got together, roughly the population in the city the size of Chicago or San Diego, to play a game of dice, and each person had a trillion-sided dice, and they all rolled the dice at the same time, and they come up with the exact same number. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Your chances of being alive, of ever being born, are 1 in 4 trillion. Literally, if one thing goes differently in a different way in history, you're not here. One soldier makes the wrong step on a battlefield in the course of time, and you may not exist. You are absolutely a miracle. Cherish it. And that brings me to the first principle. We must keep perspective. When all is going wrong and fear is taking over your life, always remember how much of a miracle that you are, because for you to be here, trillions of others that may have been are not. So use perspective to keep you grounded in fear-based situations. Now, you've also, Hannah, heard me mention before about the animal part of our brain. I said a little bit about it earlier. What I'm really referring to is the subconscious part of our brains. And believe it or not, this is the part of our brain that runs us without us ever even realizing. Ask yourself, where do my thoughts come from? Have you ever thought about that? Why do you think the way that you do? Why do you have reactions that you do to situations in life? All of this comes from our subconscious, and the subconscious stores these automatic pre-programmed responses from the conditioning and life experiences that we have from the day we're literally born. Sources of this conditioning are many, right? Their parents, their family, their friends, school, culture, media, religion, just to name a few. And a lot of what we get from these sources is really good. But we can also pick up things that can be negative and affect our potential. And this is really kind of the dark side of the subconscious, because for all the power that it has, it's actually not that smart in that it doesn't decide if the conditioning that it's received is truly in the best interest of you or the best thing for you or not. It just follows the programming. And that's why a person's mind can actually be their biggest obstacle to success or their biggest asset to success, because whatever your subconscious is programmed to is where you end up. And so once we become aware to this fact, we can use it to our advantage and really change things. And there are two ways that I found to do this that really make the most difference. First, we must learn to live from true choice and not from programming from the past that may not be in our best interest. The best way to do this is to control our attitude. So your attitude is your inner game showing through to your outer game. And I often joke that I've not had a bad day in years. Why is that? Because a bad day only happens if I choose to let it happen. I control my attitude. So if I allow negativity and fear to impact it, that's my choice. Now, sure, just about every day, things don't go as planned, or life doesn't happen exactly as I want them to, or we want that to, right? But it's our choice and how we let it affect us. It's our choice how we react. And that brings me to the second thing you can do, which is a simple little practice that I started doing, about 20 years ago when I learned about all of this around the subconscious. And I call it stop, ask, and choose. So let me explain that for a second. Stop, ask, and choose is it's kind of weird at first when you start doing it, because it's literally stopping yourself in the moment, asking yourself if the thought or the reaction that you're having is the right one, and then choosing how to move forward. So if you have a thought that all of a sudden you stop yourself and you're saying, gosh, do I want to think that? Is that what I should be thinking? And then you choose, maybe, no, that's not what I should be thinking. I should think this. Right? And then you move forward, right? You stop, ask, and choose. Now, the first few times that you do this, it is incredibly weird. It's awkward and everything else. But after doing it several times and continuing to do it, it gets easier and easier and easier. And it becomes almost a second part of you. It helps you become aware to these things in your life. And so when you start stopping and asking and choosing, it starts to reframe that subconscious and reframe those thoughts you want them to have. Again, it's extremely awkward at first. And for a lot of people, they won't do it. But if you do it, it does make a huge difference for you. So remember to stop, ask, and choose. And that brings me to my last couple points. First, Tom Zig Ziglar's son, said something very profound to me when he was on the podcast. And I asked him the question, what's the fastest path to success? And his answer was simply replace a good habit with a bad habit. Think about that for a second. What if you took one bad habit that you had today and you made the choice to start replacing it with a good habit? And when you've established that new good habit, you pick another bad habit and you begin replacing that, and so on and so on. Where would you be in 6 months? Where would you be in a year? what kind of transformation would take place for you? Remember, most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a week, and they way underestimate what they can accomplish in a year. Imagine where you could be a year from now just by replacing bad habits with good habits. So playing the long game is important to this. And with that said, principle number 2 is to learn to take control and responsibility for your conditioning and your thoughts. This alone can help you harness and gain massive control over fear and fear-based response in your life. Okay, principle number 3 comes from the story of an incredibly brave man, Vice Admiral James Stockdale. James Stockdale spent almost 8 years as a prisoner of war in the brutal Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam. During this time, James never broke. In fact, he would do everything to sabotage his captor's plans so that he would not be used as a propaganda tool, including things like beating his own face to sheer bloodiness with legs of chairs to keep from being paraded around by the enemy. Imagine that. It truly is an amazing story of determination, survival, and grit, and you should look it up and read more about it. But years later, he was interviewed by Jim Collins of Good to Great fame, and Vice Admiral Stockdale shared what I think is some of the greatest advice for success in dealing with fear that probably we can ever get. Collins asked him, "How did you deal with such harsh circumstances and uncertainty?" And Stockdale said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn that experience into the defining moment of my life, which in retrospect, I would not trade." Collins then asked him another question. He said, "Who were the type of people that didn't make it out of the POW camp?" After some reflection, Stockdale said, "That's easy. The optimists. They were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas." And then Christmas would come and Christmas would go. And they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter, right? And then Easter would come and Easter would go. And then they would say, we're going to be out by Thanksgiving, right? And then it would be Christmas again, and so on and so on. And he said they died ultimately of a broken heart. And it was after he said this that he shared the lesson with Jim Collins. He said, "You must never confuse faith that you'll prevail in the end, which you can never, ever, ever afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be." Think about that for a second. And that's really the principle number 3 for dealing with fear. You must balance faith, optimism, and reality. You have to recognize reality for what it is and don't shy away from it and don't be afraid of it. And then keep faith in your ability to see things through, really whatever they may be. Okay, so far I've shared that in order to best manage fear in your life, you must, number 1, keep perspective. Number 2, take control and responsibility for your thoughts and conditioning. And number 3, balance faith, optimism, and reality. But the next principle is what makes the most difference, because you have to do the work throughout life to have these principles work for you. Once you decide to go down this path, you can't just do it once and think that it will continue to work for you over and over again. You can't wake up, choose to have a good attitude for one day and think it's just going to magically happen every day from that point. So it's daily work. You must put processes in place to recondition your mind and reinforce your new belief system. It's a commitment that most are really never willing to make. And this separates the high achievers in life and people that can overcome fear. It really takes 3 things to ensure that you keep this commitment to yourself. What I call DCP. Discipline, consistency, and persistence. And this is principle number 4. Let me explain this real quick. So discipline, consistency, and persistence, right? Sounds simple, right? Right? Discipline, consistency, persistence. It's duh, right? But what is discipline? Discipline is doing the things that you know you need to do even when you don't want to do them. What's consistency? That's doing things disciplined day in and day out without fail. And even if you are disciplined and consistent, you're going to hit plateaus. You're going to hit like insurmountable roadblocks in life that seemingly you can't figure out or you don't know how you're going to get around. And if you're not persistent in those times to get through that, that's where you're going to stay. That's where you're going to stagnate. So it takes all three: discipline, consistency, and persistence. So once you've embraced the first four principles, the last one is pretty easy to understand and put to work. And that is, what you focus on expands in your life or becomes your reality. Which is why learning to focus on what you want and push fear to the side is so important. Focus overcomes fear. Oh, and one more thing. Stop worrying. Worrying is praying for things that you don't want. Worry and anxiety take a great toll on our minds and our bodies. For example, research has shown that anxiety causes high blood pressure. Researchers placed a mouse in a cage, and at another location within the mouse's sight, they placed a cat in a cage. The cat had no contact with the mouse. Their cages were never close together. The cat never escaped from its cage, and the cat never had an opportunity to really ever threaten the mouse. But the cat was in the same room, and the mouse knew it. The mouse kept its eyes on the cat at all times. 6 to 12 months of testing revealed the mouse had developed very high blood pressure and other conditions. Nothing had happened to it. Its life had never been in jeopardy, but worry almost killed it. So many of us are like that mouse, seeing potential danger and borrowing trouble that really may never come. And instead, we should look for the opportunity and the good in every situation and focus there so that it expands in our lives. Hannah, as I mentioned earlier, doing all of this is lifelong work and a commitment to yourself. But I promise you, and anyone watching or listening, that if you do make this commitment in your life, it will change in amazing ways. The quality of life will change. A whole new world of potential and possibility will open up for you. Focus over fear, Hannah. I love you, Dad.